30,000. I've been around the hobby since the early 2000s, but really I'm going to say my hobby journey started in 2019 was when I really got back into the hobby and started to embrace the modeling side of it and not just the gaming side of it. I've always loved storytelling, and that was the original appeal for me coming into Warhammer, was the ability to tell these grand narrative, huge stories involving epic armies of warfare in the far future, and it's just a grim setting. I decided perhaps the best, most genuine, most useful thing I can contribute to the already wonderful Warhammer community is, hey, here's all of the things I wish I had known as a beginner from a beginner. So if I say that 2020, 2019 is really when I started back up in the hobby, we're only a couple years into it. We have learned a lot along the way, and I want to help impart that onto new players because this is not an easy, accessible game. There are a lot of levers you got to pull. There's a lot going on, and there will be times that you feel really overwhelmed by all of it. Fear not. We have all been there. Get overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that goes on in this game because it's just a huge, huge universe, and there's hundreds of ways to interact with it, literally, and there's no wrong way to do it. That's the first thing to learn. There's no wrong way to interact with this property. There's no wrong way to hobby. There's no wrong way to nerd. That's the motto for the show. This is the chapter-approved Arks of Omen Grand Tournament Pack. We're going to be breaking this down, and it's going to be kind of three things as a new player that you need to know about this book. Now, that's going to start with what is chapter approved, and what did I mean earlier when I said it was the start of a new season. So, Games Workshop decided what they were going to do is they were going to break up the year into 2 seasons, and each season was going to get a chapter approved, meaning rules for the next 6 months. This was a way that instead of doing full resets on editions or waiting until full resets on editions, they could address some imbalances in the game to make it more enjoyable, both at the narrative open play side and especially when you get into more matched play sides. Again, we're going to break all of those phrases down in a bit here, but just to level set what a season is, it's 6 months with 1 chapter approved book, that being this one. Now, each season has 2 quarters, and those quarters will also get balanced data slates, and we're going to look at the first one for this book as well. So that is also coming up. Thing number 1 you need to know about the chapter-approved Arks of Omen Grand Tournament is that there is an entirely new way that you will construct your army rosters. It's called an Arks of Omen detachment, and you can see it, boom, right there. There it is. That's what we're looking at there. Now, you see all those little red boxes there? Those are the compulsory picks. Those are the things you have to have versus the white ones. Those are the optional, the grayed out ones. Those are optional. So you're going to start with an HQ. That's a headquarters. You got to have that. That hasn't changed much from the last edition. And then instead of in the previous editions and like every edition I can remember, you had to have like X number of troops and like this number of elites, depending if you were going to do a patrol or a brigade or a battalion. Now it's really easy. It's all just 1 detachment. It costs no command points, which is really nice. I actually really like this. I like this a lot. It's not that I had anything against the old detachment ways of doing things, but I can imagine that just being a massive headache to balance from a game design standpoint. And with certain armies, you always felt like you were just burdened to fill these slots. Like, what's the cheapest thing I can put in here that's actually going to do anything? There are 3 stratagems. You have a warlord trait, a relic, and a heroic support. So your warlord does not get a free relic. They didn't go back to Nachmund rules, which was the first season of last year, I think. They've stuck with, if you want relics and traits, you got to pay CP for them. But they've made your detachment 0 CP. So you're still net positive there. And then there is the heroic support stratagem there as well, which if you have units that are restricted to 1 per detachment, you can use this strat to take a second one of those because you don't have the option of taking multiple detachments anymore. You only get the one Arks of Omen detachment. But I am glad that they left in some detachment allied abilities here. So, like, for instance, the Gene Stealer cults, you can take one patrol of Brood Brothers. Or you could take an auxiliary support or super heavy auxiliary detachment. Right off the bat, there was an errata. So there was an update to this book that just came out and shipped. That happens because lead times on printing are long and whatever. No big deal. You just go to the website, you look at the update, and it has updates for adding Supreme Commanders to your detachment. Don't panic. You can do it. No big deal. And also for the Drukhari players out there, we got a little bit of a gift. It's not the good old days where you could just run 3 patrols, where they were just refunding CP for all of your detachments as long as they were patrol detachments. It's not quite that good. But you can run an Arks of Omen, and then you can take one additional patrol detachment of whatever. So if you're running a Cabal, you can take a Coven. The next thing that's going to be in this book is all of your secondaries. Now, secondaries are for matched play, and I suppose in open play too. They don't show up too much in Crusade, but certainly in match play. And these are going to be ways that you're going to score points. In this edition, they've just preset. Everybody starts with the same 3 secondaries. Assassin, grind them down, and behind enemy lines. And they made some slight changes to all of these, so if you're used to the old wording, I would recommend looking at all of the new secondaries because there are some changes here, probably too many for me to point out in one video. So you're going to start with those 3 preset secondaries. From there, you can switch to any number of faction secondaries. You can take 3 faction secondaries. So if you're playing 1,000 Suns, you can take all 3,000 Suns. But the same rule applies that you can't double up on any particular category. So each secondary falls into a category: Purge the Enemy, No Mercy, No Respite, Warpcraft, Battlefield Supremacy, and Shadow Operations. You can't take 2 Shadow Operations. You can't take 2 Warpcraft. You have to take 3 secondaries from 3 different categories. That's the only restriction on secondaries, other than you can't take secondaries that aren't from your faction. But I really hope that would be self-explanatory. If you're just getting started, right, and this is going to be the first season you play, and you don't have a lot of games with your army under your belt yet, I would really recommend just sticking with the 3 presets. Like, don't even look at secondaries yet. Just go with those 3. Score them as best you can. Secondaries are a tricky thing to do. I struggled with them a lot when I was getting into the hobby and starting to learn how to play my armies, because until you have a sense for how your army is going to function on the tabletop, what your play style is going to be really is another huge factor in what secondaries are going to work for you. Some secondaries lend themselves to being hyper-aggressive. Others, you're going to play more passive. If you're a hyper-aggressive player and you're picking passive secondaries, it's just not going to work out super well for you. So I would recommend just go with the presets, score them as best you can, and until you have a better idea of how your army functions, just stick with that. I think the changes to the detachments are great, and I think that the secondaries are great as well. They've made a lot of changes there. We're going to have to do like a whole episode on the changes to the secondaries, because that's a lot of information to take in that is just not going to fit in one episode. It's just too much. But really, I am excited about this chapter approved. I think it's a win. And I think ultimately, I know a lot of people right now are nervous about what the meta is going to look like. You know, that's going to do what it's going to do. That's a huge hobby, you know? You are empowered to play it the way you want to play it. Don't let somebody tell you how you have to play it. All right, so we did leave time, a little bit of time. So the other thing, right, we talked about the Warhammer community web page, but the other thing you're going to want to know going into 2023 and getting into Warhammer, there is something called the Balance Dataslate, right? This is going to come out quarterly. So you're going to have, every year, you're going to have 2 seasons and then 4 quarters, right? So the first Q1 Balanced Data Slate is up. The Balanced Data Slate is going to tell you all the changes to the core rulebooks and to your codexes that are going to apply for that quarter. Space Marines. Okay, here's the one you should really be aware of if you're a Space Marine player, or if you're new and you're going to encounter Space Marines, which they're everywhere. I think everybody has at least one Space Marine army sitting around, because if you're just in the hobby for a while, it seems like you collect them. Space Marines, their tactical doctrines now are optional to move through them. So you're going to still start in Devastator Doctrine, but you don't have to ever leave Devastator Doctrine. If on turn 2 you want to stay there, cool, you can. Turn 2 you want to move to Tactical, fine. Turn 3 you want to stay in Tactical, great. Now once you move into one, you can't go back. That still hasn't changed. So this is going to be something, if you're new to Warhammer, you're going to want to be aware of when these are coming out, and you're going to want to familiarize yourself with it. I recommend just print it off, stick it in your codex, whatever, bring it with you. All right, that is going to do it for our discussion on the chapter-approved Arks of Omen Grand Tournament for Warhammer 40,000 from Games Workshop. I hope that was helpful for new players out there. This is the first time that we're going into the Warhammer universe, so love some feedback on it. Whether you're starting out or you've been in the hobby for a while, let me know what you thought about this video. If you enjoyed this episode, if you liked the content that was in it, please give it a like. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications. That way you can get more awesome content about this, because we are going to be spending a lot of time this year talking about Warhammer.